If you go throughout the country, as I do all the time, people are concerned about their kitchen table issues. Are they going to be able to pay the bills? 50% of the American people could not withstand a 50% surprise, whether a broken car or broken water heater or whatever it is. So that's what people are concerned about. So I have not been one of these focusers on impeachment and reports and the rest of that. Let the chips fall where they may when we have the evidence and the facts. We'll see what comes forth. We'll see how much the Attorney General decided that it was at his discretion to redact. Now, I'm an intelligence person. That's where one of the places I was forged in the Congress. I respect protecting sources and methods. I don't support hiding the truth from the American people.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi keeping an eye on the release of the Mueller report while also suggesting that Democrats have a lot more on their plate than simply focusing on the special counsel. And of course, Willie, we're waiting to see what is going to be in the Mueller report. And I do think at some point, either a committee or the American people need to see the entire report at this point. I'm absolutely concerned that the big build-up to the reveal of the Mueller report will be used by those who perhaps want to protect the president and whatever is in there to sort of make it look like a wah-wah. So I am bracing people to understand that this may be very redacted. We may see nothing. We're waiting to see if we're going to see something.
And the president has already declared wah-wah when William Barr's report came out that he believes shows that there was no
And that
collusion.
was untruthfully, since the end of Barr's letter quoted the report as saying on the basis of obstruction, it was not an exoneration.
Right.
So that lie, which he was able to brand on the big buildup, so everybody don't get into an uproar. Let's wait and see just how redacted this is. It may be another moment where we have to wait longer for real information.
And I think, as Speaker Pelosi suggested, there are two constituencies. There's the public and there's Congress. And the Congress can handle classified material, and it does all the time. So they should see the full report. Now, the concern I understand from special counsel and the Attorney General that will all be leaked out by certain members of Congress, and maybe that's true. Maybe the public doesn't need to see the full report with classified information. In fact, it doesn't need to see classified information, of course. So there's a redacted report for the public, but I think Congress should get the entire thing. Yeah, intelligence should see the report.
Here's what I'm wondering about the report. If we are to believe what we've been told by both parties, both by the White House and the Special Prosecutor's Office, that the White House has not been privy to the report, they have not seen the report, how is it that they have prepared, according to Rudy Giuliani, a rebuttal?
Yeah.
How do you prepare a rebuttal to a report
You can't.
that you have not yet read?
And honestly, whether it's Donald Trump's tax returns, Sarah Sanders is saying, you know, the Congress isn't smart enough. There are more people, someone should let her know, in Congress than Devin Nunes. So we're good. Like, somebody with some smarts on these committees will be able to see what's going on, actually caring about the American people and not protecting the president.
And we just have to let that process play out. And I, like you, think that the expectations game has gotten completely out of control here.
It's used by the president.
It's used completely to his advantage. And that's why I found Nancy Pelosi's tack in that interview to be very interesting. And she's been quite politically savvy. And I've been a harsh critic in the past of some of the speaker's actions, but she has been masterful over the past year. And she's really trying to lead her party in the smartest direction politically, approaching 2020 by saying, let's focus on kitchen table issues. Let's not just overhype.
Because there's a lot of them, thanks to the Republicans, like health care.
There's a back and forth that used to be subtle, but now is out in the open between Speaker Pelosi and Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. You had Speaker Pelosi on Monday at an event in London saying this about the Congresswoman.
When we won this election, it wasn't in districts like mine or Alexandria's. However, she's a wonderful member of Congress. I think all of our colleagues will attest. But those are districts that are solidly Democratic. This glass of water would win with a D next to its name. But the 43 districts, we won 43, net gain of 40, were right down the middle, mainstream, hold the center victories. And if we're going to be helping the 1 in 5 children in America who goes to sleep hungry at night, who lives in poverty in our country, we have to win.
You are contending with a group in Congress. Over here on the left flank are these self-described socialists. On the right, these moderates.
Whatever orientation they came to Congress with, they know that we have to hold the center, that we have to go down the mainstream.
They know that?
They do.
But it doesn't look like that. It looks as if it's fractured. You have these wings, AOC and her group on one side.
It's like 5 people.
No, it's the progressive group. It's more than 5.
I'm a progressive, yeah.
Yeah.
Through clenched teeth, she says, no, that's like 5 people.
But also just like casting the whole thing off as silly, just with a look in her eye. Like, really?
It's been interesting to watch her manage this.
The Civil War playing out. You
Right.
have now she is dealing with the Democratic version of the Tea Party, and you wonder if this is going to end up for her much like it did for John Boehner, and she's going to end up, pushing for weed legalization, or if she's going to be able to pull it off and control the party.
We should never forget, when you're watching the speaker in situations like that, when questioned like that, about issues like that, about the various members of the progressive wing of the party, you are listening to and watching Nancy D'Alessandro.
Yeah.
You're watching the daughter of the former mayor of Baltimore, Maryland, Tommy D'Alessandro, and she has elbows.
That's a tough town. Don't underestimate her. We have so much to get to. We haven't even really dug into the buildup to the Mueller report, the next 24 hours, and what we're expecting. Still ahead, President Trump vetoes a bipartisan resolution to end U.S. involvement in the Yemen war. Turkey is eyeing a U.S. sanctions waiver. And the latest following the devastating fire at the Notre Dame Cathedral. We're going to go around the world with Richard Haas next on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.